happiness is an emotion. Therefore, the only way to achieve happiness is to feel that emotion. Okay. Yes.
Changing that, I thought Aristotle said that money was not happiness. It could assist in the causing of happiness, but it wasn't happiness. And that was the point I was going to bring up, because with the other 2 points on, I think it was honor and... Do you know what the other one was? It was money, honor, and... Wisdom, I think, maybe. Anyway, with the other 2 points, I know he dragged it all the way back to the root. He said that this is a part of it, this is a part of happiness because blah, blah, blah. And then he got into money and he said this isn't a part of happiness. Happiness is, it's not a part of happiness because you get this happiness out of what you get with the money. But that threw me off a bit, because with the other 2, he dragged it back to the root and said, yes, this can all be summarized as honor, therefore honor is part of happiness. But with this one, he said, no, money is not part of it. You need to be more specific. And I was questioning whether we agree that money isn't a part of happiness, or whether we need to be more specific when saying money is a part of happiness.
Savannah?
Just quickly to answer that question, I think money is a pathway to happiness. I don't think it's happiness itself. But I also think like seeking happiness takes away from true happiness, because you're always feeling like you're missing something or you want something, and I feel like this constant want can also become negative or like potentially jealousy, which is not, in my opinion, is not true happiness if you're constantly battling with these feelings.
And if we want to make the distinction between happiness itself and pathways to happiness, and we're saying money is just a pathway, do we say the same thing about honour? Honour is a pathway to happiness, or honour is happiness itself?
I mean, I think it's a bit debatable, because on one hand, honour can make someone feel happy, like as you feel praised and appreciated and loved, but I don't feel like that's exactly what happiness is. But then again, it can link, so there's like a bit of an overlap.
And so I think we could probably follow that line of thinking. So even if we think honour is a pathway to, you said, love and praise. You said honour is a pathway to love and praise. I could ask the same question again. Is love or praise happiness itself? Or is that just a pathway to something else? I won't bombard you anymore, but that might be a question for us to think about. If we can identify some things as happiness in itself and some things as pathways to happiness, how do we know which is which?
I was gonna say something about your point. You said that it's kind of, if you're constantly going after like this like validation or things like when you want more and more and more, it's likely to make you not happy because you constantly want more. So are you essentially saying that happiness is almost like fulfillment, or happiness is like being like content? And then also with the thing that Aristotle said, with like wealth, because you don't want to become rich or become wealthy for nothing. You always want it for some sort of reason, whether that's to buy things, to show off, you never try and obtain all this wealth to not use it in any way.
But then, is there another step along that? So let's say you obtain a lot of wealth to buy a big house. Are you buying the big house for itself, or are you buying the big house because you want the status symbol of having a big house? And if you want the status symbol of having the big house, do you want that in itself, or do you want the status symbol because you want people to idolise your lifestyle? And if you want people to idolise your lifestyle, do you want that in itself, or do you want something further? So this is the overarching question we're trying to move towards, is what is the end of happiness, if we can identify pathways towards it. Did you want to respond, or you want to move on?
Well, what if you just want that big house because you've, say, always wanted this big house and it's just been a goal that you've always had? And if you have this big house not only to live in and to enjoy and to be happy in, but to kind of like show off to people and like kind of get like validation. Wouldn't like being happy because of validation, wouldn't that still be happiness?
Are you asking me? What do you think? Would that still be happiness?
I think it could make you happy in the moment, but as happiness overall, as a whole like category, I don't think constant validation can make you happy, because it often is kind of a pathway like wealth. I think you might have said this as well. It's it's almost another step on the pathway for something, because you need kind of constant like validation and like gratification to reach this like unknown kind of end goal.
So does that challenge Renee's answer from before, that happiness is a feeling? Because you said you can feel the feeling of happiness in the moment, but that's not real happiness. So do you want to make a distinction between the feeling of happiness, which might be momentary, and actual happiness? Or do you think they're together in some way?
Well, happiness is almost kind of like an umbrella term, because someone could say, like, are you happy overall? Like, are you living like a happy life? But you could also still get upset at some things or angry at some things. Happiness is not almost like an ultimatum. It's kind of like just this overall kind of concept. It doesn't mean that every single thing has to be happy or a happy moment to add up to happiness.
Ava?
I feel like happiness can also be seen as not just an emotion, but like an experience. Like if you put it this way, when it's like short-lived happiness, say you just like bought a new house, got a new car, it's not like you're always going to have that I just got a new house feeling, because it's going to get old, and that's more an experience rather than...
And is the experience happiness better, different, the same, not connected at all to the emotion of happiness?
They're definitely connected, because both of them have like, you get the same type of feelings, like the good feeling, but it's kind of like hard to distinguish, like, because you can't always be happy all the time. Like, we're humans, we have different emotions. So technically both are temporary, both the emotion and like the experience.
Dragging off Ava's point, I agree with that to an extent. I feel like happiness is a broad term used to summarize this feeling or chemical reaction in your brain or experience or lifestyle or path. It's a broad term to group all those together, because it's hard for us as people to explain what we are in the current moment. Like, if I'm trying to explain that I got a house, it's setting off these chemicals in my brain, it's making me feel warm and fuzzy inside, I'm thinking of all these good experiences, it's adding to my lifestyle, it's my dream goal. I could sum it up with, this new house makes me feel really happy. It's all of these things under one big umbrella, which I think is what causes the confusion as to what happiness is, because there's so many possibilities as to what happiness could be.
So happiness is not a thing, it's a category of a bunch of other things that, when put together, is what we call happiness.
Yeah, so happiness can, as we just said, be summarized by like a bunch of different things that make us feel that that kind of good feeling. And I think that that's kind of an event of being happy, and life happiness, the one that everyone really wants, is kind of having strung a bunch of those events together to make it so you feel that feeling very often. And also, I think you said something about having the goals, and I think that's a big part of achieving that happy feeling and being able to stretch it out, is having goals, because you can have like pathways to happiness and all that, but really, if your goal is to be able to buy whatever you want to buy, then that money is the goal, and once you achieve that money, then that will give you happiness. And same with popularity. If your goal is to be popular, that will give you happiness once you achieve that. It might not last as long as some other things will. Like if you learn an instrument, you will be able to achieve that happiness, but also that'll open up opportunities to achieve other happinesses, like learning new songs and learning new instruments. But all of those goals do make that happy feeling that you just described.
So if we pick up your idea that happiness is this umbrella term and there's a bunch of things in there, and you can set goals to achieve a bunch of those things.
Yeah.
And you also said some of those things may open up more avenues to even more happiness.
Yeah.
Are those types of things better than other kinds of happiness? So is there a better happiness and a worse happiness? For example, the musical instrument opens up more doors to more types of happiness compared to, was it the house example, only makes you happy in one way and doesn't open up doors. Does that mean the musical instrument happiness is better than the house happiness?
Well, I don't think it's better happiness. There's no one happiness which is better than another. Well, and if one happiness is better than another, that's subjective. Like if you care more about achieving one goal than another. But the instrument will give you more opportunities to have more happiness than to have more different kinds of happiness than the house will. That doesn't mean that the happiness you get from learning the instrument is better. It just means that the instrument is a gateway to more opportunities to get to be happy.
Okay. So then,
Going off what you just said, I kind of view happiness as like more of a journey, and like think of it as a tree. It's like got lots of branches stemming off with different like possibilities, like you were saying with the musical instrument. And I also feel like your goal kind of changes. Like even if you use the house analogy from before, you were talking about how you want validation and like also just a status symbol. But even in music, that could also be like validation that you can learn something, validation that you have some kind of talent. So happiness can come in all different forms, and like for some people it can be validation from others, sometimes it can be validation from yourself, sometimes it can be just a status symbols or things you own, like really dependent. And I also think like family and friends are another big thing. And I feel like that can be more so categorized in like an experience because it's like ongoing. It's not really like, oh, you have them. It's more about the memories you create with them.
that's one of the early things you said in there is I think really interesting. So earlier I asked, if there are pathways to happiness, what's the end of happiness? Sounds like you're suggesting, well, there is no end. It's a journey itself that is happiness. Sylvie?
It's kind of like happiness is like an individual thing, and like you said, you can't just kind of be one isn't really worth more than the other. Happiness is almost like a spectrum, and it can be very different for different events and different people, and it's hard to kind of put like a label on that and say, oh well, the happiness of doing this is like greater than the happiness of doing this, as in different scenarios you can feel different kinds of happiness, and something say might give me an amazing amount of happiness for a very short period of time, but who is to say that that happiness is worth more than say happiness that was a little bit less extreme but kind of went on for longer?
In my head, I'd like to propose I change what I said about an umbrella, because in my head I'm thinking that happiness could end, and the way that I picture that is instead of an umbrella, more like a branch, like a tree branch, because you start off with this push, you start off with this goal, which could be the main stem of the branch, and then off that branch you get other little branches, which could be like, you could start off with music, for example. Music, oh, but I want to try guitar, and then that could branch off into, oh, I love guitar and double bass and bass guitar and banjo, and then, unlike the umbrella, I could be following along with banjo and I grow a leaf and it just ends there. Or I grow a leaf and then the leaf falls and dies because I get sick of banjo. I don't like banjo anymore, it doesn't make me happy. Or you could factor in other people, like, oh, I'm following along this path of banjo, something traumatic happens, like someone else steps off the branch, banjo doesn't make me happy anymore, I've lost that, but you can grow it back because it's a branch. You can grow past this traumatic event and go, oh, I'm rediscovering banjo, and regrow that branch and regrow those leaves. So I think the umbrella was a good wrap up, but I think a branch makes more sense to me in my head because it's the only way I can explain to myself the way that it kind of moves and gets cut back and grows over time.
I think that, like, as Alex kind of like suggested, like your happiness, the things that make you happy are going to change. Like, we live in a society where there's constantly like different trends, and you like develop different hobbies and stuff over time. So the things that once made you happy won't like make you feel the same way anymore. So you kind of need to be like satisfied from within, like internally, before you let like possessions and like external factors define how happy you are.
So there's nothing objective that we could say. Doesn't matter who you are. If you get this, you will be happy. It's all down to the individual.
Yeah.
Well, it is subjective what makes you happy. I think there is one thing that will make the branch in your example longer and make that happiness last longer, and that's how much work you have to put in. For example, with the getting the house, you have to put in a lot of work to get that money, and then once you get the house, you've got the house. There isn't really, unless you want to progress more on that money branch, you can't really start a sub branch out of that house. Well, God, I think I've gone on the tangent from my idea. What am I trying to say?
Effort to happiness.
Yeah, effort. So I think that what really makes something give you more happy, makes you feel more happy, is how much work it took. For example, if you just want to go on a war, that's going to make you happy, but it's not going to make you happy as learning that one song that you've spent years trying to learn all the strings and the strums and all that for. That song is going to be a lot more rewarding than that walk was, and that's kind of how you extend these branches and make the tree more lively.
And so if we say that, are you thinking that there are, as I asked you before, better kinds of happiness and worse kinds of happiness? Or is it just the case that something gets you more happiness quantitatively?
Yeah, in this case, I'm actually going to disagree with what I said before and say that yes, that happiness can be better depending on how much effort you spent into achieving it, and also how much you specifically want to be in that subject. Like, you can be told to put effort into something by someone else, but if you choose to put effort into something and put a lot of effort into that thing, that'll maximize how happy that makes you feel.
Sylvie?
So are you like kind of essentially saying that validation is happiness, whether it's your own validation of spending all this time learning this thing and then finally being able to do it, or say somebody else saying, oh wow, you're so amazing, like playing that song, it was really good and you feel good about it because you know you spent so much time into it? And is that also saying that you can't be happy about something or feel happiness regarding something if you have not put like a tremendous amount of work into it? Because, for example, you could be happy about this new friendship that you have, but you could be happy about it because it brings you so many great opportunities, or you just really love the person when you really did not do that much work to kind of find the friendship.
Yeah, well, I think for that friendship example, I think that's kind of the stem of a branch, or the very beginning of a branch, because then that can lead into all the branches of what you do with that friend and what things you can do with that friend. And on the topic of, what was the thing you said before that? I've already forgotten.
Like the song, the guitar thing, was that it?
It was something about, I was going to say something about it. But...
Happiness, like, is like,
Validation?
yeah.
Oh yeah, about the validation. Well, it really depends on who you are. If you value how much you value your own validation against someone else's validation. So if you like, and also depends on what you're doing. For example, if you're playing an instrument, if you're learning how to play the instrument, then your validation would matter a lot more in how you put work and how you feel about it. While if you're playing a song, somebody else's someone else giving you validation would be a lot more important, because then that proves that you played this, because then that more proves that you played the song well.
Is this going to be a specific question?
So are you kind of almost saying that happiness isn't kind of about you or regarding you, more so what other people think of you?
It's kind of a balance of both. Again, it depends on what you're getting happiness from. If it's a personal thing that won't involve other people, like something like you want to make something to put in your house, like you want to build your own table, then that's really, you need your own validation for that. While if you want to do something for something else, for someone else, like play them a song, you kind of need their validation to prove that, okay, I did this really well.
It's going to be another specific.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, are you saying that you cannot be happy or experience the feeling of happiness without validation at all? From yourself or from anybody else? No validation, or can you not feel happiness?
Well, the entire point of being happy is feeling, I should have done this. This is kind of good for me, and that kind of, well, actually, I'm going to rephrase that. I don't really think that is happiness. I think that's more of a response to happiness. And while happiness isn't really made from validation, validation is made from happiness. So when you're happy, you think, okay, this was a good thing to do, and you kind of validate what you just did.
So the validation is required for the happiness, but it's sort of...
It kind of helps you find, it's kind of like a guide. So I'm like, this was a really good decision. This has made me really happy. I should try doing more of this. That's kind of validating yourself.
So where there is validation, there's probably happiness, but you don't absolutely need the validation to be happy.
Yeah.
Specific there.
I think you might have said that, like, kind of validation kind of stems from happiness, more so the other way around. What if it's something that you had no control in and got kind of no really validation out of? For example, I'm going to say that you had a really great relationship with your family, and you had always had that. It had always been like that. You didn't have to do any work towards it, and you didn't do any work to get it. You didn't have to put any work in, and then you didn't really necessarily get any validation out of it. Would you be saying that happiness would be kind of invalid, or it wouldn't be happiness because you didn't do anything for it, and you didn't kind of see it as this whole goal that you strive to achieve, more so just thing that was just kind of handed to you, but still made you incredibly happy and still kind of showed you so much like love and support and was just so amazing?
Yeah, well, that's kind of, from my perspective, that feels like kind of making it really broad, because inside of that relationship between you and your family, there are a bunch of mini things you had to do. And those things, like, for example, like doing chores and them helping you with homework and stuff like that, those little mini challenges kind of all combine into happiness that can be seen from from that relationship. And, well, with different relationships that you didn't have to put effort into to get originally. Well, you're never you never see someone and you're immediately happy. You have to talk to them and you have to put in at least a bit of effort. And when that leads to more effort, and then when that leads to more stuff happening, more effort being put in, more and making you more happy, that can kind of been broadened into the relationship made you happy, and you didn't really have to put much effort to get the relationship. So you can't really equate those two things.
Savannah?
Going off like the branch kind of tree analogy, I think going off that point, you talk about how it could be validation from yourself or you're pushing yourself. So that could just like happen, like how a normal tree grows. And then talking about like how it's like the luck of the draw, that could be like the weather, how sometimes there's good weather. But then when you talk about other people like not really enforcing you, but like pushing you to do something that generates happiness, that could be like the fertilizer or like the nurturing, the water. Like, so I feel like the branch or the tree analogy is a very good way of summing this up.
Yes, and we're not just saying it is a tree, we're building in different features within that. Last one.
You brought it up quickly at the end, and I completely forgot about it, but it was the effort scale to happiness scale. Personal example here, which you might not agree with. I like to play Minecraft. It would have taken me much less time to download Minecraft, sit there, play for 30 minutes and be happy with it than it would have taken me to sit there and band, like we did the other day, and learn a whole new song on the drums for hours for the same, let's say, 30 minutes of happiness. I don't necessarily agree with your point on this effort to happiness scale because I don't think that they line up very well. Like, it definitely has a factor in happiness. Effort definitely has a factor in happiness, but I don't think it's a defining factor of happiness.
Right, an interesting point to finish off. It was really great that we built up an analogy throughout this whole session, and as always in philosophy, there's always going to be disagreements among everyone. We're not trying to get to one resolution, we're just trying to build an overall picture, just like we were doing with our tree.